The afternoon light drifted gently across the small riverside town, laying a warm golden hush over everything it touched. The wind moved slowly, as if careful not to disturb the quiet rhythm of the day. Inside a modest wooden home at the edge of town, a little girl was leaning over a small table, her fingers tracing the rim of a fragile tin box where she kept her savings. Each coin carried a tiny memory of chores done, neighbors helped, and small sacrifices made in silence. Today, she would finally use it. Today was her grandmother's birthday, and she had dreamed for months about surprising her with a simple but beautiful cake, something sweet, something made with love, something that felt like a hug in dessert form. She imagined her grandmother's smile, those soft eyes that always seemed to understand her even when she didn't know how to speak her feelings out loud. The thought alone warmed her like a quiet fire. Everything around her felt peaceful, almost sacred, as if the world itself was pausing to honor the tenderness of her intention. And in that stillness, there was a soft invitation for anyone who happened to be listening, to slow down, to breathe a little deeper, to step gently into this unfolding story about love, giving, and the invisible threads that tie us to one another. If this is your first time here, feel free to subscribe to Mindful Path to hear more stories that soothe the heart and remind you of what matters. And now, let us begin this journey together, moving softly, like footsteps on morning dew, letting the story open slowly, like a small lantern glowing brighter with each breath you take. The little girl had been saving for this moment far longer than most people knew. It began on an ordinary morning nearly 8 months earlier, when she noticed her grandmother's hands trembling slightly as she poured tea. Not from sickness, not from weakness, just age quietly, gently making its presence known. Yet her grandmother never complained, never asked for anything, never wished aloud for something more. She simply smiled, as if contentment was something she could brew like the tea leaves steeping in her cup. On that morning, the girl felt a soft ache bloom in her chest, an urge to do something meaningful, something that might show her grandmother how deeply cherished she truly was. But gifts cost money, and money did not come easily to a child. So she decided she would earn it one small act at a time. She offered to sweep porches, carry groceries, help mend fences, and water gardens for neighbors who lived alone or were too busy to tend to the little tasks of life. People paid only what they could, sometimes coins, sometimes snacks, sometimes simply a thank you, but she kept every small piece of change that found its way into her hands. Her tin box grew heavier slowly, the way a river fills drop by drop. Many nights, after finishing homework, she would shake the box gently, letting the soft clinking sound remind her of her purpose. She imagined the cake she would buy vanilla with a hint of lemon, her grandmother's favorite. A small candle. A handwritten note. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet expression of gratitude for a woman who had given her a home full of warmth. As the days passed, she learned something without anyone teaching it to her, that love is built in the small, unnoticed moments. It is not loud. It does not demand applause. It grows like moss, soft, patient, steady. And with every coin she earned, she felt her heart stretch a little wider, as if generosity was shaping her from the inside out. Her grandmother would sometimes watch her return home dusty and tired, her clothes marked by the day's work, her hair wild from the wind. The older woman would smile, wondering what drove the girl to be so diligent, but choosing not to ask. There was trust between them, a silent agreement that each had their own world of thoughts and dreams that didn't always need to be spoken aloud. Weeks turned into months. The tin box grew fuller. And on this particular day, the one the story now rests upon, she finally opened the box and counted the coins with trembling excitement. She had enough. Enough to buy the cake. Enough to make her grandmother's birthday feel radiant in a way words couldn't capture. She closed the box gently, holding it close to her chest. Outside, the river shimmered in the late afternoon sun, carrying reflections that danced like scattered stars. The town was calm. Life felt whole and uncomplicated. She believed the day would unfold exactly as she had planned. But life, in its quiet, mysterious way, was preparing a different path for her, a path that would test the depth of her compassion and stretch her heart far beyond the borders of her tiny home. For now, though, she held nothing but hope and the sweet anticipation of giving. The kind of giving that feels like sunlight resting on your palms. The morning the river rose, the sky carried an unsettling stillness, too quiet, too heavy, as if holding its breath. Clouds thickened like layers of grey wool pulled tightly across the horizon, turning the light a muted silver that dimmed the usually bright streets of the small town. People sensed it without saying anything, the way animals sense a coming storm, the way trees stand unnaturally still before the first drop of rain breaks open the silence. The girl stepped out of her house clutching the tin box, its weight comforting in her hands. She planned to walk to the bakery at the far end of the river road, the one with the warm vanilla scent that drifted out onto the street like a gentle invitation. She imagined placing the order, imagined carrying the cake home carefully so the frosting wouldn't smudge. Everything seemed perfectly aligned, as if the day itself wanted to celebrate her grandmother. But as she turned the corner near the riverside bridge, she slowed. A cluster of neighbors stood at the edge of the road, their faces tight with worry. The river, usually calm, reflective, soft as satin, had swelled high against its banks. The water churned with a strange urgency, swirling as if stirred by invisible hands. It was rising fast. She watched as the first wave slapped against the lower steps of the footpath, spilling over just enough to make people step back. A woman held her child tightly. A fisherman stared quietly at the water, reading it the way others read books, slowly, carefully, with a knowing that came from years of living beside its moods. The girl's heartbeat softened into a cautious rhythm. Something was changing. Then the sirens began. Not loud, but steady, an announcement that the river had crossed the level where safety could be assumed. Volunteers began gathering near the supply shed, pulling out ropes, flashlights, sacks of dry food. One man called out for help carrying crates. Another shouted for updates from upstream. The girl stepped closer, unsure, her small fingers tightening around the tin box. The world around her seemed to shift into a sharper focus, every sound clearer, every movement more urgent. A neighbor she often helped in the garden rushed past her. His shoes were soaked, his breath unsteady. When he saw the girl, he paused only long enough to say, "The North homes are flooding. They need help. Families are still inside." His words felt like stones dropping into a still pond, sending ripples through her chest. She looked down at the tin box, the symbol of her months of effort, of quiet dreams, of the love she carried for her grandmother. Inside was everything she had worked for. Everything she had planned. The bakery was still open. She could still go. She could still buy the cake. She could still make her grandmother smile the way she had imagined for so long. But the cries in the distance tightened around her heart. Someone shouted for more blankets. Someone else called for clean water. A teenage boy ran by holding an armful of soaked clothing he had just pulled from a flooded house. A little girl cried into her mother's coat, cold and frightened. The world was suddenly larger than her plan, larger than her little celebration, larger than her wish to bring a moment of sweetness to the woman she loved most. She took a step back, then another, feeling the ground beneath her feet shift, not from the river, but from within herself. Her breath grew quiet, like a candle flame flickering in a draft of wind. She opened the tin box slowly, hearing the soft clinking of coins against metal. Each sound felt heavier than the last. She knew, in that instant, that there are moments in life when love asks us to choose again. To widen our circle. To stretch our hearts until they ache in the most beautiful way. To give not because we are ready, but because someone else cannot wait. A volunteer hurried toward her, not noticing the child standing in his path until he nearly collided with her. He apologized quickly, already moving again, his arms full of supplies. The girl tightened her grip on the box. The bakery sign flickered in the distance. The river roared behind her. And somewhere in the midst of it all, she felt her heartbeat sinking with a truth she had not expected to face today. Sometimes the gift we planned is not the one we are meant to give. The rain did not roar down all at once, it arrived gently, almost politely, as if aware that the people below were already overwhelmed. Soft droplets brushed the girl's cheeks as she stood near the riverside road, the tin box tucked close to her chest. The world smelled of wet earth and cold wind, a scent that carried both warning and a strange kind of purity. She took a slow breath, letting the air expand inside her like a quiet question. Volunteers hurried past her, their footsteps splashing through shallow water that stretched wider with every minute. A supply truck backed up near the small storage shed, its wheels sinking slightly into the softening ground. People moved quickly, but there was no panic, only a solemn determination, as if everyone understood that in moments like this, there was no time for fear. The girl found herself stepping toward them without fully knowing why. Something inside her tugged forward, steady and gentle, like an unseen hand guiding her steps. She reached the long wooden table where the volunteers were triaging food and bottled water. A woman with soaked sleeves and a calm, focused expression looked up at her. "Sweetheart, this area is a bit busy. Are you lost?" the woman asked, brushing wet hair away from her forehead. The girl shook her head and held up the tin box. Rain tapped lightly on the metal lid. I want to help," she whispered, her voice small but clear. The woman hesitated, glancing at the chaos behind her. "It's dangerous out here. Shouldn't you be home?" "I live close," the girl said softly. She opened the box just a little, revealing a soft shimmer of coins inside. "I have money. I was going to buy something today. But maybe someone needs it more." The woman blinked, taken aback. Her expression softened, the way clouds soften when sunlight presses through. She lowered herself to the girl's eye level, rain dripping from the end of her coat. "You worked hard for this, didn't you?" The girl nodded once. "And you want to give it away?" Another small nod. The woman's throat tightened, the emotion hitting her unexpectedly hard. She placed her hands gently on the girl's shoulders. "You're doing something incredibly kind, you know that? More than most adults would even think to do." The girl lowered her eyes, shy under the weight of such words. She didn't feel heroic. She didn't feel special. She just felt pulled, as if compassion itself were a river rising inside her, overflowing its own quiet banks. The woman guided her to a sheltered corner of the supply area, where a young man was counting donations, mostly small bills and a few checks from families who managed to contribute what they could. When the girl held out her tin box, the young man blinked in surprise. "This is yours?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. He opened the lid and drew in a long breath. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, barely enough to stock a few boxes of canned food, maybe some dry blankets, maybe medicine. But the weight of it, the story behind it, made it feel immeasurable. He nodded gently. "Thank you. We'll use this where it matters." The girl stepped back. She expected to feel hollow or sad or somehow empty without the box she had held for months. But instead, something warm spread through her chest, steady and quiet, like embers glowing beneath soft ash. She watched as the volunteers carefully bagged supplies, loading them into small boats that bobbed impatiently near the river's edge. Some families were already being ferried to higher ground. Others waited with soaked belongings clutched to their chests. Through it all, the girl felt herself pulled forward, as if the story of the day had not finished writing her role. One of the volunteers, a college-aged woman with a bright yellow raincoat, noticed the girl lingering nearby. "You can help us sort blankets," she said warmly. "If you want to." The girl nodded, and together they carried bundles of dry blankets from the back of the supply shed, stacking them carefully. The girl folded each one with the same care she used when folding her grandmother's sweaters after laundry day. The rain thickened, tapping more persistently on the shed's metal roof, but she stayed focused, hands moving softly, almost rhythmically. After a while, her clothes were damp, her hair clinging to her cheeks, her fingers cold, but she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. Every task, no matter how small, felt like a thread woven into something larger. A man rushed in, water dripping from his coat. "We need more dry food for the east side, families are trapped in their attics." A volunteer called out, "Can someone help load crates?" The girl stepped forward without hesitation. Her small arms struggled a bit under the weight of the crates, but someone always appeared beside her, lifting the other end, steadying her, never letting her fall behind. Hours slipped by the way they do in moments that matter, quietly, seamlessly, fully. When evening approached, the rain softened, turning into a drizzly mist that coated everything in a silvery veil. The river remained swollen, but the immediate danger had eased slightly. The volunteers gathered around a temporary rest area, sipping warm broth from paper cups. The girl stood near the edge, her clothes still damp but her spirit bright. The woman in the soaked sleeves approached her again, a small smile forming. "You've done more than enough today, sweetheart," she said gently. "Does your family know where you are?" "My grandmother is home," the girl replied. "I'll go to her now." The woman hesitated, then said, "I hope she knows what a remarkable girl she's raised." The girl offered a shy, almost fleeting smile before stepping away, her shoes squishing softly in the damp earth. The air felt different, cleaner somehow, calmer. As she walked the familiar streets back home, she felt as if the world had shifted slightly, tilting her toward something she couldn't yet name. When she pushed open the door of her home, Her grandmother looked up from her chair, her eyes warm but surprised. "You're soaked," the older woman murmured, standing slowly. "Where have you been, little one?" The girl hesitated. The truth sat at the edge of her lips, trembling like a small bird. She stepped forward, burying her face against her grandmother's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of the older woman's heartbeat. "I was going to buy your birthday cake," she whispered. "But the river rose. People needed help. So I gave them everything." Her grandmother froze, not in shock, but in something deeper and quieter. She placed one hand on the girl's head, her fingers running through damp hair. "Oh, my dear," she exhaled, voice trembling. "You gave them everything." The girl nodded lightly against her chest. The grandmother closed her eyes, holding the child more tightly than she had in years. Not out of fear, not out of worry, but out of a love that had been cracked open wider by the child's compassion. "You didn't lose anything today," the older woman whispered. "You found yourself." The girl felt a soft warmth spread through her, mingling with the scent of her grandmother's clothes, lavender soap and old books, and the kind of comfort that only time can make. Outside, the river continued to breathe its heavy breath. But inside their small wooden home, a different kind of river flowed, one made of tenderness, of understanding, of quiet pride. As night settled, the grandmother lit a single candle, not for celebration, but for gratitude. The flame flickered gently, casting a warm glow across their faces. They sat together in silence, listening to the distant sounds of volunteers still working, their hearts aligned with those who needed warmth. In that moment, the girl understood something that would stay with her for the rest of her life: true giving doesn't diminish you. It expands you, like a lantern glowing brighter each time it shares its light. Night settled softly over the town, wrapping the quiet streets in a cool, velvety calm. The river still murmured in the distance, its swollen currents reflecting the faint shimmer of moonlight. Inside the little wooden home, the girl and her grandmother sat close, sharing the kind of silence that doesn't need words to feel full. The candle between them flickered gently, casting warm waves of light across the walls as if blessing the room with its steady glow. The girl leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder, feeling the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of each breath. Something inside her had shifted, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in the deeply tender way a seed breaks open beneath the soil, quiet, unseen, yet life-changing. The event of the day replayed in her mind like a series of soft lanterns lighting up one by one. The rushing river. The fearful faces. The blankets she folded. The tin box she'd let go of. And the moment she realized that love wasn't just something she felt, it was something she could become. Her grandmother stroked her hair gently, her touch warm despite the chill in the air. "Kindness given freely," she whispered, "always finds its way back. Maybe not as money, maybe not as things, but as peace, as clarity, as the strength to walk through this life with an open heart." The girl breathed slowly, letting those words settle deep inside her. The day had not unfolded the way she planned. The celebration she imagined never happened. And yet, the world felt fuller, richer, more connected, like she had stepped into a wider story than the one she woke up expecting. A story where compassion flowed like a river, touching everything in its path. Outside, the rain finally stopped. A long, calming stillness settled across the town, as if nature itself were exhaling after holding too much for too long. The girl lifted her eyes to the candle, its flame steady and bright, and felt a quiet gratitude bloom within her. Gratitude for her grandmother. Gratitude for the chance to help. Gratitude for the lesson she hadn't known she needed. She knew the days ahead would still hold challenges, still hold moments of uncertainty. But she also knew this: when the heart chooses compassion, it never walks in darkness. And before the candle burned low, the grandmother whispered a final blessing into the soft night air: "May your heart always be brave enough to care." If you found today's story meaningful and helpful, please consider pressing the like button below the video. And if the content we share resonates with you, you may also think about subscribing and sharing the channel to help more people discover our videos. Thank you for watching, and may your day be peaceful and full of gentle energy.